Hello, this video here is a continuation of my pre-buyer vehicle inspection for used cars. Just some of the things to look out for, what might need to be repaired down the road or what needs to be fixed in order for the vehicle to pass a certification in order for it to be legal on the road. Things I'll be covering in this video consists of tires, brakes, and suspension components. Now with regards to tires, you just want to do a spot check all the way around the vehicle to make sure the model of tire is all the same. Then moving on to the wear pattern, you normally want to check if the wear pattern is roughly the same between all four tires on the vehicle itself. Sometimes one tire or two tires will be a little bit less than the others, which can be common, something that's not too severe. Depending with front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive vehicles, some tires do have more wear because they are the drive tire as opposed to the other ones. So this is normally why you do rotate your tires. Now for checking the wear pattern, you want to check the wear pattern from the across the whole surface of the tire itself. Sometimes what will happen if there's insufficient amount of air in the tire itself, what will happen is it'll either wear out the center more or wear out the outsides more. Now if there are suspension components that actually have gone in the vehicle itself or do need to be replacing, or say there's something that's actually out of alignment, what will happen is you'll have either uneven wear on the outside of the tire like this that can occur on either sides or both sides at the same time. They won't occur in the center of the tire. Now with checking the depth of the tread itself, now this does depend on government regulations. Depending where you live, they normally do have a set specification in order for the vehicle to be certified for the road and also safe to drive. What you'll have here is just these bars that'll just pop out of the tread itself here, and what they'll do is actually take a measurement from this bar to the outside edge of the tire. Now there is a given measurement, so that's something you want to keep note of, and just possibly if you're looking at a vehicle, purchasing it, you just want to check and you kind of get a rough idea what the life expectancy of the tire is and any upcoming maintenance down the road you might have if you do purchase the vehicle itself. Inspecting suspension components. Usually it helps if you turn your wheel to one side here, like I have here on the vehicle itself right now. And you can usually sometimes peek your head in the inside here, just to take a look. First we'll be starting with the ball joint here. Normally what we want to check for in the ball joint is to see if it's the rubbers are actually cracked, because normally what will happen is if the rubbers do crack, water will get inside and dirt, and this will wear out the joint itself, so it will need replacing down the road. Sometimes when you do take the vehicle for a drive and you go over bumps on the road itself, you can sometimes hear it clunking, so that's just something to keep in mind. Now moving on here, we have your sway bar here, so we want to look for is any bushings in there that possibly are cracked, and they may need to be replaced depending how much play is in them. The same goes for your control arm here. You do have bushings up that go to your subframe here, so there is bushings that can wear out over time and they can need to be replaced. Now this is a front-wheel drive vehicle itself, so what we actually have here is a drive shaft, and that comes to a CV joint itself with a rubber around it. Normally this rubber can also deteriorate, same as your ball joint or any other rubbers in your suspension parts. What will happen here is water and dirt will come inside there and wear out the joint itself, so this does need to be replaced. Sometimes you can purchase a new boot. Other times if it's gone for a longer period of time and has worn out the CV joint itself, you can replace the CV joint itself, or other times you might have to replace the whole axle. Now there is also a CV joint on the inside too. That's something else you want to keep in mind. Now on some rear-wheel drive vehicles with independent rear suspension, they will also have the same setup here. Other ones will have a solid axle. Now moving on to the back side of the fender well where you have the wheel turned. This also includes the front. Now what we have here is a tie rod. Now this goes straight to your steering rack itself. Sometimes these covers will actually wear out, same as the CV joint boot covers also. And what will happen here is sand and dirt will get inside. They'll work their way through the seals and get in your steering rack, so that's something you also want to look out for. That can be a very costly fix if it does need to be replaced. Other things you also want to look for is if there's any oil dripping on the steering rack itself. Sometimes they do leak. Seals do wear out over time, so that will need to be replaced also. Now moving to the end of the tie rod itself here, where it actually hooks up to the spindle, behind the wheel here, what you'll have here is the same joint, similar as a ball joint. It does have, these can wear out over time and do need to be replaced. Normally what you can do is turn your wheel to one side and actually take a peek inside your fender well itself. Now it does help when you bring two people with you to inspect the car. What you'll do is you actually have the other person just jiggle the steering wheel ever so slightly, and sometimes you can see the tie rod bounce a bit. Now this does need to be replaced for a safety check because the vehicle is unsafe to drive for the road. Now moving on to your shocks and springs, you just want to check these are coil spring setups here. So you want to see if everything is still intact with the spring itself. Sometimes these springs do break over time because they're just fatigued and just from being used just every day. So these will need to be replaced in order for the vehicle to be safe for the road. Other things you also want to make note of here too is that you actually have a boot over top of your shock itself. Now some vehicles don't have this, most do. This is just to keep the dirt out of the shock, just to ensure the life of the shock itself so it doesn't leak and doesn't go rust. So just something you want to make note of is to look at that. You also want to check for any residue forming around the shock itself. These shocks are filled with oil. There's different variations of these shocks. Now what will happen here is if this does start leaking with oil, it will be losing pressure, so the shock will need to be replaced. Now for the rear of the vehicle, this does vary between how the suspension setup is here. This is a solid axle in the back, which is connected with coil springs, and then it has also shocks to dampen the bounce on it. So this is a slightly different setup, but you also want to just check the springs to ensure that none of them are broken and the shocks are not leaking themselves. Now with other vehicles such as pickup trucks, you'll have rear leaf spring setups. They also have shocks, and instead of a coil spring they actually have a leaf spring. So you want to ensure none of those leaf springs are actually broken. What will happen over time, just over usage, sometimes one of the leaves will actually break in the spring, so this is something that will need to be replaced in order for the vehicle to be safe for the road. Now moving on to brakes on a vehicle. Now on the front you normally have disc brakes, on the rear you'll have drum brakes. Sometimes there can be disc brakes on the rear of the vehicle also. For disc brakes you normally just want to inspect the rotor itself here to ensure there's no scarring in the surface. Sometimes you will have a little lip on here or on the top edge, which can be perfectly normal. Just after usage over time the rotor still does wear down, even with the pads itself. Other times if you do have any excessive scarring in the surface itself, they will either need to be replaced or resurfaced. As with resurfacing, it normally is cheaper because they do cut some material off the existing rotor. With replacing a rotor, it can get expensive depending on your vehicle's make and model. Just for example, say a place to cost to resurface a rotor can be $20. Now to replace that rotor you may be looking at say $70 or $80. So there is a big difference here. With resurfacing a rotor, it does affect the integrity of the rotor itself, so it's just something to keep in mind, because it does actually make it thinner so it's not able to withstand as much heat as it normally would. Now with looking at your caliper itself here, now normally your caliper is located at the front of your rotor here at the front of the vehicle itself. Other times it might be located on the top here on the back side. Now this does depend on vehicle make and models. What you'll look for here is you actually have a pad on the inside which touches the rotor itself, so you want to ensure there's still quite a bit of surface between that. Normally when your brakes are starting to get down there is wear indicators, so they will squeak. Sometimes also, depending on what composition of pads you use, they also squeak, so it's kind of hard to tell the difference. So it's just something to keep in mind. Now if they are getting down quite a ways, they will need to be replaced in order for your vehicle to be safe to drive and for it to pass certification to be legally put on the road itself. Now moving on to drum brakes, which are at the rear of the vehicle itself here. There is actually no real way of inspecting the drum brakes themselves. What they actually have inside is actually shoes as opposed to pads, which are on rotors. What these shoes actually do is push up on the outside of the surface of the drum itself. So in order to inspect these, you will have to pull the wheel and drum off itself to see inside, to see how the pads are. Sometimes you can, if the seller will let you, take the vehicle to a local mechanic and just have them inspect it, just to have their professional opinion on it. So that's always something to look out for. Now with regards to a parking brake setup, Parking brakes do lock your rear wheels in place. With drums, they just push the shoes to the outside of the drum itself. Now, if you have rear rotors on your vehicle, it actually has, I guess the best way to explain it is a rear drum setup inside the rotor itself. Some do actually have a locking caliper. So that's also something you keep in mind, and which is something that it is needed to pass a certification to ensure your parking brake does work itself. Now, with inspecting a parking brake itself, just to ensure that it is working, I wouldn't normally always recommend this because some people actually don't use their parking brakes, and what happens over time, especially with automatic vehicles, they don't get actually used. So if you do pull up on it, it might actually make the brakes stick themselves. But this is needed to pass safety to make sure it does work. So what you usually do is just pull up on the e-brake itself, just to make sure there is tension within the lever itself. Sometimes a cable can break, or there is linkage that can break or let go. So that's something just to keep in mind. Now when you are letting it back down, you want to make sure that there is full tension all the way down. Sometimes what will happen is, say within the last half inch of movement, you might have a little bit of play, as to previously when you did pull it up. What this can indicate is that maybe something is sticking within the parking brake mechanism itself. This can include somewhere between the lever all the way down to the cable and to the components at the rear brakes themselves. So that's just something to keep in mind about. This is needed to pass a safety in order for the vehicle to be certified on the road. Now when taking your vehicle for a drive, what you want to do is usually get it up to a good highway drive, just to ensure that there are no sounds throughout your suspension itself. Sometimes it does help to go down a bumpy road to hear if there's anything loose in the suspension. Sometimes you will hear a clunking, which can indicate that there may be something is worn out and does need to be replaced. Other times what you also want to check for is when you're going down a straight road itself. You don't want to make sure there is no hills, anything like that. You just want to let go of the steering wheel ever so slightly and see if it does pull to one side or the other. This may indicate that there is something out of alignment in the suspension, something does need to be replaced, or it could possibly be in a bad tire. Now this does vary between whatever the severity of the issue is itself, but it's just something to keep in mind and make note of also. Now you can also do the same thing with brakes. When you're applying the brakes itself, you want to see if it does pull to one side or the other. Maybe this might indicate that one side of the brakes are working better than the other, something might need to be adjusted or replaced. So it's also something to keep in mind for any cost that might come just ahead of you. Now this is it for my tutorial video on inspecting the vehicle suspension, tires, and braking system for a pre-buyer vehicle inspection. Now if you have any comments or questions, please don't hesitate to post them, and thank you for watching my video.